Sarah Martinez clutched her swollen belly as another sharp pain shot through her body. The cold concrete floor of her prison cell felt like ice against her bare feet. She had been counting the days, and the baby was coming whether the prison was ready or not. The guards at Riverside Women's Correctional Facility treated pregnant inmates like they were nothing more than numbers. Sarah had begged for weeks to see a real doctor, but they kept telling her the prison nurse was good enough. The nurse, Mrs. Patterson, was a cruel woman who seemed to enjoy watching the inmates suffer. When Sarah's water broke at 3 a.m, she screamed for help. The sound echoed through the empty hallways, but no one came. Her cellmate, Maria, had been moved to solitary confinement the day before for talking back to a guard. Sarah was completely alone. The contractions came faster and harder. She tried to remember what she had learned in the one childbirth class they allowed her to attend. Breathe in, breathe out. Focus on something else. But the pain was too much. Hours passed before a guard finally heard her cries. Officer Jenkins, a young man who had only been working at the prison for 6 months, found Sarah lying in a pool of blood and fluid. His face went white with shock. He had never seen anything like this before. Instead of calling for medical help right away, Jenkins radioed the warden. The warden, Mr. Thompson, was known for following rules no matter what. He told Jenkins to move Sarah to the medical wing and call Mrs. Patterson. No outside doctors, no ambulance, no exceptions. Jenkins helped Sarah to the medical wing, but by then she was barely conscious. The baby was coming whether anyone was ready or not. Mrs. Patterson arrived 20 minutes later, clearly annoyed at being woken up. She looked at Sarah like she was looking at a broken piece of equipment. The birth was a nightmare. Mrs. Patterson had no real training for complicated deliveries. When the baby finally came, it was blue and not breathing. Sarah could barely lift her head, but she could see something was terribly wrong. The nurse worked on the baby for what felt like forever before the tiny lungs finally filled with air. Baby Emma was born weighing only 4 pounds. She was so small and weak that Sarah was terrified to even hold her. But Mrs. Patterson snatched the baby away immediately. She said the baby needed to be kept in the medical wing for observation. Sarah begged to keep her daughter with her, but the prison had strict rules. Newborn babies could only stay with their mothers for a few days before they had to be placed with family members or put into the foster care system. Sarah had no family left. Her own mother had died 2 years ago, and her sister wanted nothing to do with her after the conviction. The days that followed were the worst of Sarah's life. She was allowed to see Emma for just 1 hour each day. During these precious moments, she would hold her tiny daughter and whisper promises that she wasn't sure she could keep. She promised to be a better mother than she had been a person. She promised to find a way to give Emma a good life. But Sarah was facing a 20-year sentence for armed robbery. She had made terrible choices that led her to this place, and now her innocent baby was paying the price. The guilt was eating her alive. Mrs. Patterson made everything worse. She would make comments about how babies born in prison never had normal lives. She would tell Sarah that Emma would be better off without her. These words cut deeper than any physical pain Sarah had ever felt. On Emma's 5th day of life, Sarah learned that social services was coming to take her baby away. A foster family had been found, and Emma would be removed from the prison the next morning. Sarah spent that entire night holding her daughter, memorizing every tiny feature of her perfect face. She kissed Emma's forehead and whispered, "Mama loves you, baby girl. No matter what happens, remember that Mama loves you." The next morning came too soon. Sarah had to watch as a stranger in a business suit took her daughter away. Emma's tiny cries echoed through the hallway as they disappeared through the prison doors. Sarah felt like her heart had been ripped from her chest. But this was only the beginning of her suffering. What Sarah didn't know was that the foster family who took Emma was not what they seemed to be. And in a few months, both mother and child would face dangers that would test every ounce of strength they had. 3 months had passed since Emma was taken away, and Sarah felt like she was dying inside. Every morning she woke up expecting to hold her baby, only to remember that Emma was gone. The other inmates tried to be supportive, but most of them had their own children taken away too. The pain was something only another mother could understand. Sarah had been trying to stay in contact with the foster family through the social worker, Miss Rodriguez. But every time she called, she got the same answer. The family needs time to bond with the baby. Contact will be allowed when Emma is older. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. Miss Rodriguez always seemed nervous when Sarah asked questions. She would give short answers and hang up quickly. Sarah had asked to see pictures of Emma, but was told that wasn't allowed during the adjustment period. Late one night, Sarah's cellmate Maria returned from solitary confinement. She had spent 3 months in isolation for fighting with another inmate. Maria was tough as nails, but she had a soft spot for mothers separated from their children. She had lost her own son to the system 5 years earlier. "You look terrible," Maria said as she settled onto her bottom bunk. "Have you been eating?" Sarah shook her head. Food had no taste anymore. Nothing mattered without Emma. "Listen to me," Maria said firmly. "I heard things while I was in solitary. The guards talk when they think no one is listening. That social worker who took your baby, she's been under investigation." Sarah sat up quickly. "What kind of investigation?" "Something about babies being placed with families who aren't properly checked. Money changing hands. Your Emma might not be safe." Fear shot through Sarah's body like electricity. She had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed made her feel sick. "What can I do? I'm stuck in here for 20 years. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "There's someone here who might be able to help." "Have you heard of the Apache woman in Block C?" Sarah had heard whispers about a Native American woman who kept to herself in the maximum security wing. The other inmates called her Ghost because she moved so quietly. Some said she had been a warrior before coming to prison. Others said she knew old magic that could help people escape impossible situations. "Her name is Elena Crowfeather," Maria continued. "She's been here for 15 years. Armed resistance charges from some protest that went bad. But she has connections on the outside. People who owe her favors." "Why would she help me?" Sarah asked. "Because she understands what it means to have your family torn apart by the system. The government took her children too a long time ago, before she ended up in here." The next day, Sarah found a way to get a message to Elena. It took 2 weeks of careful planning and calling in favors with other inmates. Finally, arrangements were made for them to meet in the prison library during Elena's assigned reading time. Elena Crowfeather was not what Sarah expected. She was a small woman, maybe 50 years old, with long, gray-streaked hair braided down her back. Her eyes were the darkest brown Sarah had ever seen, and they seemed to look right through her. But there was also kindness there, and wisdom that came from years of pain. "You're the one who lost her baby," Elena said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and I think she might be in danger." Elena nodded slowly. "The spirits have been restless lately. They whisper of children in trouble." "Tell me everything." Sarah poured out her story. Elena listened without interrupting, her dark eyes never leaving Sarah's face. When Sarah finished, Elena was quiet for several minutes. "The social worker you mentioned," Elena finally said. "Rodriguez. I know that name. She's part of a network that sells babies to families who can't adopt through legal channels. They pay huge amounts of money for healthy infants." Sarah's hands started shaking. "My Emma is probably with people who bought her, not a real foster family. They might love her or they might just see her as property they purchased." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Her baby, her precious Emma, sold like an object. "But there is hope," Elena continued. "I have people on the outside who can investigate. It will take time and careful work, but we can find out where your daughter is and who has her." "What do you want in return?" Sarah asked. She had learned that nothing in prison came free. Elena smiled, and for the first time since Emma was born, Sarah felt a spark of hope. "You don't owe me anything, but I will need your help with something else. There are other babies in the same situation, other mothers who have been lied to. If we're going to save your daughter, we might as well save them all." Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. "Tell me what I need to do." Elena's network moved like shadows. Over the next month, Sarah learned that the Apache woman had connections she never could have imagined. Former protesters, civil rights lawyers, investigative journalists, and even a few sympathetic law enforcement officers who had grown tired of corruption. The information started coming in pieces. Emma was indeed with a family who had paid over $50,000 for her through Rodriguez's illegal network. The family lived in a wealthy suburb about 2 hours from the prison. They had been told that Emma's mother was dead and that they were her only hope for a good life. But the news got worse. The investigation revealed that this particular family had a dark history. The father, Dr. Marcus Webb, was a respected surgeon on the surface, but he had been investigated twice for inappropriate behavior with patients. Nothing had been proven, but the allegations were disturbing. The mother, Catherine Webb, had a severe mental illness that she hid with expensive therapy and medication. She had become obsessed with having a perfect baby after losing 3 pregnancies. She saw Emma as her miracle child and refused to let anyone else care for her, including hired help. Most troubling of all, Elena's contacts discovered that 2 other babies purchased through Rodriguez's network had died in the Webb household under mysterious circumstances. The deaths were ruled accidents, but the pattern was suspicious. Sarah felt like she was going insane with worry. Her baby was living with people who might hurt her, and there was nothing she could do from inside prison walls. She barely slept and could hardly eat. The other inmates were worried she might do something desperate. "We have to move fast," Elena told her during one of their library meetings. "My people on the outside are working on a legal challenge to get Emma removed from that house. But the system moves slowly and your baby might not have time." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Elena looked around the library to make sure no one was listening. "There's another way. More dangerous but faster. I'll do anything. My nephew, Joseph Crowfeather, lives about an hour from where Emma is being kept. He's been watching the house for the past week. He says the family keeps Emma isolated. She never leaves the house and no one else is allowed to see her." Sarah's heart was breaking. Her 6-month-old baby was being kept like a prisoner, just like her mother. "Joseph has a plan to get Emma out of there safely," Elena continued. "But it would mean you'd have to escape from here to be with her. Once you break out, there's no coming back. You'd be fugitives for the rest of your lives." The choice was impossible. Stay in prison and hope the legal system eventually saved Emma, or risk everything on a dangerous escape that could get them both killed. "How would it even work?" Sarah asked. Elena smiled grimly. "I've been planning my own escape for 5 years. I have routes mapped out, safe houses arranged, and people who owe me favors all along the way. I was waiting for the right moment, but your situation changes everything. You'd give up your own freedom for my baby? My children are grown now. They've built lives without me, but Emma is still small enough to have a real chance at a different future." Besides, Elena's eyes grew distant. "The spirits have shown me that our paths are connected. Helping you is part of my own journey." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the woman's generosity, but also terrified of the risks. What if we get caught? What if something happens to Emma during the escape? Then we'll face whatever comes. But if we do nothing, I believe your daughter will not survive much longer in that house. My contacts have seen signs that things are getting worse. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Emma's tiny face and her perfect little fingers. She thought about the promises she had made when her daughter was born. She had sworn to protect her child no matter what. By morning, her decision was made. "I'm in," she told Elena the next day. "When do we go?" 2 weeks from tonight. There's a new guard starting his shift rotation then. Someone my people have already paid off. The timing has to be perfect." Elena spent the next few days teaching Sarah everything she needed to know. How to move quietly, how to stay hidden, how to survive in the wilderness if necessary. Sarah learned that Elena had grown up on a reservation where her grandfather taught her traditional Apache survival skills. These skills had served her well during her years of activism and would serve them now. "Remember," Elena said during their final preparation meeting, "once we're out, we can never go back to our old lives. We'll always be running. Are you ready for that?" Sarah thought about Emma crying herself to sleep in a stranger's house. She thought about the dangerous people who had bought her baby like property. She thought about the system that had failed them both. "I've been ready since the day they took her away from me." 2 nights later, as the prison settled into its usual evening quiet, Sarah and Elena prepared to risk everything for a chance to save an innocent child. Neither of them knew if they would live through the night, but they both knew they had to try. The night of the escape, Sarah's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had spent the entire day pretending everything was normal, but inside she felt like she was about to explode from nervousness. At dinner, she could barely swallow her food. Maria, her cellmate, kept shooting her worried looks. "You sure about this?" Maria whispered as they walked back from the cafeteria. "Once you're gone, there's no turning back," Sarah nodded. She had to do this for Emma. Every fiber of her being as a mother demanded that she try to save her child no matter the cost. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the lights in their cell block went out as scheduled. This was when the paid-off guard, Officer Martinez, would be starting his rounds in a different section of the prison. Elena had timed everything perfectly. Sarah waited in the darkness, counting her heartbeats. At midnight, she heard the soft sound she was waiting for, 3 quiet taps on her cell door. It was time. Moving like a shadow, Sarah slipped out of her cell. Elena was waiting in the hallway, dressed in dark clothes she had somehow acquired. Her face was painted with what looked like mud, making her nearly invisible in the dim light. "Follow me exactly," Elena whispered. "Step where I step. Stop when I stop. Make no sound." They moved through the prison like ghosts. Elena seemed to know every blind spot, every guard rotation, every camera angle. Sarah realized that the Apache woman had been planning this escape with military precision for years. They reached the laundry room without being detected. Elena pulled away a loose panel in the wall, revealing a tunnel that led to the old sewage system beneath the prison. The smell was horrible, but Sarah didn't care. This tunnel was her path to Emma. Crawling through the narrow space in complete darkness was one of the most terrifying experiences of Sarah's life. The walls pressed in on all sides, and she had to fight panic attacks several times. But Elena's steady presence ahead of her kept her moving forward. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a storm drain outside the prison walls. Sarah had never been so happy to breathe fresh air. They were free, but their real journey was just beginning. Elena's nephew Joseph was waiting for them with a beat-up pickup truck. He was a quiet man in his 30s who looked like a younger version of Elena. He hugged his aunt briefly, then turned to Sarah with serious eyes. "Your baby is in bad shape," he said without preamble. "I've been watching the house for 2 weeks. The woman hardly ever puts her down, but when she does, Emma just lies there. She doesn't cry much anymore. That's not normal for a baby her age." Sarah's heart clenched with fear and rage. Her baby was suffering while she had been trapped behind bars, helpless to protect her. "What's the plan?" Sarah asked. Joseph spread a hand-drawn map on the hood of the truck. "The house sits on 2 acres of land, mostly isolated. There's only one neighbor close enough to cause problems. The husband works long hours at the hospital. It's usually just the woman alone with Emma during the day." "What about security?" Elena asked. "Surprisingly little. Rich people in that neighborhood rely on distance and privacy, rather than cameras and alarms. The front door has a basic lock, and there's a dog door in the back that's big enough for a person to squeeze through." Sarah studied the map, memorizing every detail. "When do we go?"
"Tomorrow afternoon."
"The husband will be in surgery, and the woman usually takes some kind of medication around 2 p.m. that makes her drowsy for a few hours." They spent the rest of the night in an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. Sarah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emma's face. Her baby had been stolen from her for 6 months. 6 months of missing her first smile, her first laugh, all the precious moments that could never be replaced. Elena sat beside her, keeping watch. "You're thinking too much," the older woman said softly. "Tomorrow you need to be calm and focused. Anger will make you careless. I keep thinking about what they've done to her. How scared she must be. Babies are stronger than we think. Emma has survived this long, which means she's a fighter like her mother. Tomorrow you'll bring her home." The next morning they drove to a spot about half a mile from the Webb house. Joseph had scouted the area carefully and knew exactly where they could park without being seen. They waited until 2:30 p.m. before making their move. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the whole neighborhood could hear it. They approached the house from the back, moving through the trees like Elena had taught her. Everything was quiet except for the sound of birds and the distant hum of traffic. The dog door was exactly where Joseph had said it would be. Sarah, being the smallest, went through first. The kitchen was empty and spotlessly clean. Too clean, like a museum where people were afraid to actually live. They could hear a television playing softly in another room. Elena motioned for Sarah to stay back while she checked for the woman. After what felt like forever, Elena returned and nodded. Catherine Webb was asleep on the couch in the living room, just as Joseph had predicted. Then Sarah heard it, the soft sound of a baby making quiet noises upstairs. Emma was here. Her daughter was in this house, just rooms away from her. Sarah had to use every ounce of self-control not to run up the stairs immediately. Elena grabbed her arm and shook her head. They had to be smart about this. One wrong move could wake Catherine Webb, and then everything would fall apart. They climbed the stairs one careful step at a time. The baby sounds were coming from a room at the end of the hallway. Sarah's whole body was trembling with anticipation and fear. When she finally saw Emma, Sarah had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. Her baby girl had grown so much in 6 months, but she looked pale and too thin. She was lying in an expensive crib, staring at the ceiling with dull eyes. This wasn't how a healthy baby should look. The moment Emma saw Sarah's face, something miraculous happened. The baby's eyes lit up with recognition, and she made the soft cooing sound that Sarah remembered from those precious few days they had together. Somehow Emma knew her mother. Sarah reached into the crib and lifted her daughter for the first time in half a year. Emma fit perfectly in her arms, just like she always had. Mother and child were finally reunited. Holding Emma again felt like coming back to life. Sarah pressed her face against her baby's soft hair and breathed in her scent. It was different now. She smelled like expensive soap in someone else's house instead of the warm, familiar smell Sarah remembered. But underneath it all, she was still Emma, still her daughter. Elena touched Sarah's shoulder gently, reminding her they needed to move fast. Every second they stayed in the house increased their danger. Sarah wrapped Emma in a blanket from the crib and held her close to her chest. They made it halfway down the stairs before disaster struck. Catherine Webb was standing at the bottom, no longer asleep. Her face was twisted with rage and something that looked like madness. "Put my baby down," she screamed. "You can't take her. She's mine. I paid for her." Elena stepped protectively in front of Sarah and Emma. "That woman is not the child's legal guardian. We're taking her back to her real mother. She is the real mother." Catherine's voice was getting higher and more hysterical. "The other one was just a criminal who gave birth to her. I'm the one who feeds her and rocks her and loves her." Sarah felt sick listening to this woman talk about Emma like she was property, but she also noticed something troubling. Catherine was holding a kitchen knife in her shaking hand. "Please," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Just let us leave with the baby. You won't get in trouble if you let us go quietly." Catherine laughed, but it sounded more like screaming. "You think I'm going to let you steal my miracle baby? I waited years for her. I lost 3 babies before she came to me. She's all I have." The woman was clearly having some kind of breakdown. Elena began moving slowly down the stairs, keeping herself between the knife and Sarah with Emma. "We don't want to hurt you," Elena said in her calm, steady voice.
But that child belongs with her biological mother.
"You know this isn't right. Nothing about my life has been right," Catherine screamed. "My husband doesn't love me anymore. My own body couldn't keep my babies alive. Emma is the only good thing I have left." She raised the knife, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah thought the woman might actually try to stab them. But instead, Catherine pressed the blade against her own throat. "If you take her away from me, I'll kill myself right here. Then you'll have to explain to the police why a desperate mother died because of you." Sarah felt Emma starting to fuss in her arms. The baby could sense the tension and fear in the room. This whole situation was spiraling out of control, and Sarah didn't know what to do. Elena, however, seemed to have dealt with unstable people before. She began speaking in a different tone, not threatening or pleading, but almost hypnotic. "Catherine, I can see that you love this baby. That's clear to anyone looking at you. But love sometimes means letting go of what we want for ourselves. You don't understand," Catherine sobbed. "I'm a good mother. I take perfect care of her. I make sure she's safe and clean and fed. But she's not thriving," Elena said gently. "Look at her. Really look. She's too thin. She doesn't make the happy sounds that healthy babies make. She needs to be with the person whose body made her, whose milk was meant to feed her." For the first time, Catherine looked directly at Emma in Sarah's arms. The baby was indeed pale and smaller than she should be for her age. Even someone with no experience with children could see that something wasn't right. "The doctor said she was just a quiet baby," Catherine whispered. But her voice lacked conviction. "Babies aren't supposed to be that quiet," Sarah said softly. "When she was first born, she made little noises all the time. She was curious about everything around her. Look at her now." Catherine looked, and Sarah could see the truth hitting her. Emma was listless and withdrawn in a way that wasn't natural for a healthy infant. "I tried so hard," Catherine said, and the fight seemed to go out of her all at once. The knife dropped from her hand and clattered on the floor. "I wanted to be the perfect mother for her." "You can still help her by letting her go," Elena said. The most loving thing you can do is give her back to the mother who can help her get better. Catherine sank onto the bottom step and buried her face in her hands. Her whole body shook with sobs. Sarah almost felt sorry for her, despite everything this woman had put them through. "My husband will be home in an hour," Catherine said without looking up. "When he sees she's gone, he'll call the police immediately." "That gives us enough time to get away if we leave right now," Elena replied. Catherine nodded slowly. "There's baby formula and diapers in the kitchen. Clean clothes in the nursery upstairs. Take whatever you need for her." Sarah was surprised by the woman's sudden cooperation. "Why are you helping us now?" Catherine finally looked up and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Because I realized something when I saw her in your arms. She looked more alive in those few minutes than she has in weeks. Maybe loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even when it breaks your heart." They gathered supplies quickly while Catherine sat on the stairs, crying quietly. Sarah found herself oddly grateful to this troubled woman who had cared for Emma, even if she had no right to do so. As they prepared to leave, Catherine called out one last time, "Will you tell her about me someday? Not about this, but that there was someone who loved her before you got her back?" Sarah paused at the door. "I'll tell her that a woman took care of her when I couldn't. That's all she needs to know." They made it back to Joseph's truck without any problems. As they drove away from the house, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe that they had actually done it. Emma was safe in her arms and they were all free, but their troubles were far from over. By now, the prison would have discovered their escape, and soon the Webb family would report Emma missing. They would be the subject of a massive manhunt, with nowhere to hide and no legal way to prove that Sarah deserved to have her daughter back. 3 months after their escape, Sarah and Emma were living in a small cabin deep in the mountains of New Mexico. Elena had brought them to her cousin's land, where they could stay hidden while her legal contacts worked to expose the corruption in the adoption network. Emma was getting healthier every day. The pale, listless baby who had barely responded to anything was now a bright, active 9-month-old who laughed and played and explored her surroundings. Sarah's milk had come back after a few weeks of constant nursing, and Emma was finally getting the nutrition her body needed. Elena had become like a grandmother to Emma and a sister to Sarah. The three of them had formed their own little family in the wilderness, far from the world that had failed them both. Elena taught Sarah traditional Apache ways of living off the land, while Sarah helped Elena learn to read and write better so she could assist with the legal documents they needed. But they all knew this peaceful time couldn't last forever. Every morning, Sarah expected to wake up to the sound of police cars coming up the mountain road. The manhunt for them had been massive in the first few weeks. Their pictures were on every news channel and wanted poster from Texas to California. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Catherine Webb, the woman who had bought Emma, had suffered a complete mental breakdown after they took the baby. During her stay in a psychiatric hospital, she had confessed everything to her therapist: the illegal adoption, the money they had paid, the other babies who had died in their care. Her confession led to a full investigation of Miss Rodriguez and her network. What the authorities found was worse than anyone had imagined. Over 50 babies had been sold through the system over the past 5 years. Most of the biological mothers were women in prison or desperate situations who had no power to fight back. The scandal made national news. Elena's legal contacts, led by a civil rights lawyer named David Running Bear, used the media attention to negotiate a deal with the federal prosecutor's office. If Sarah and Elena turned themselves in voluntarily, they would be allowed to present their case in court with full media coverage. "They want to make an example of the corruption," David explained during a secret meeting in the cabin. "Your story could help dozens of other mothers get their children back." Sarah was terrified of going back to prison, especially now that Emma was healthy and happy. But she also knew they couldn't run forever. Emma deserved a chance at a normal life with schools and friends and a real future. "What happens to Emma if I go back to prison?" Sarah asked. "That's what we'll fight for in court. With all the evidence we have about the illegal adoption and Emma's improvement in your care, we have a strong case for maintaining your parental rights." Elena made the decision for all of them. "We're going back, not just for Sarah and Emma, but for all the other mothers and children who are still trapped in this system." The day they turned themselves in, hundreds of protesters surrounded the courthouse. Many were Native American activists who had come to support Elena. Others were mothers who had lost children to the system. News reporters from around the world were there to cover the story. Sarah walked into that courthouse carrying Emma, with Elena beside her, and David Running Bear leading their legal team. She was no longer the broken, desperate woman who had given birth on a prison floor. She was a mother fighting for her child and a warrior standing with other warriors. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Sarah testified about Emma's condition when they found her, and how much she had improved in her mother's care. Medical experts confirmed that Emma had been failing to thrive in the Webb household, but was now developing normally. Elena's testimony about the corruption in the system brought several jurors to tears. She spoke about her own children, taken from her years ago, and how the system continued to tear apart families without caring about the damage it caused. The most powerful moment came when Catherine Webb herself took the stand. She had recovered enough from her breakdown to testify about the illegal payments and the pressure put on her by Rodriguez to keep quiet about the arrangement. "I loved that baby," Catherine said through tears. "But love isn't possession. I see now that what I did was wrong. Emma belongs with her real mother." When the verdict came, Sarah was holding Emma in her arms. The judge ruled that the original separation had been based on fraudulent information and that Sarah's parental rights should be restored immediately. She was sentenced to time served for the escape, with credit for the months she had already spent as a fugitive. Elena received a suspended sentence in recognition of her cooperation with the investigation. More importantly, the evidence they had helped gather led to the arrest of Miss Rodriguez and 12 other people involved in the baby-selling network. As they walked out of the courthouse that day, Sarah felt the sun on her face and held Emma close to her chest. They were free, truly free, for the first time since Emma's birth. Elena had taught her that sometimes freedom requires great sacrifice and courage. She had shown her that one person standing up for what's right can change everything for many people. 6 months later, Sarah was working as an advocate for mothers in prison, helping them maintain contact with their children and fight illegal separations. Elena had returned to her activism, focusing on family rights for incarcerated women. Emma was now a healthy, happy toddler who called Elena grandma and had no memory of the trauma she had survived as an infant. She was learning both English and Apache words, and she loved to play in the garden behind their new house. Every night before bed, Sarah would hold Emma and tell her the story of the brave Apache woman who helped bring them back together. She would tell her daughter about the power of love and courage, and about how sometimes the most important battles are fought by people the world has forgotten. Emma would fall asleep in her mother's arms, safe and loved, while Sarah whispered the same promise she had made on that terrible night in prison. "Mama loves you, baby girl. No matter what happens, Mama will always love you." But now those words carried a different meaning. They were no longer the desperate promise of a helpless mother being torn from her child. They were the confident declaration of a woman who had fought the system and won, who had found allies in unexpected places, and who had discovered that love really could conquer impossible odds. The house they lived in now was small but filled with warmth. Elena lived in the guest room and had become the grandmother Emma never would have had otherwise. She taught Emma traditional songs and stories, and showed her how to identify different plants and animals in their backyard. Sarah had finished her GED while fighting the legal case, and was now taking college courses online to become a paralegal. She wanted to help other women navigate the legal system that had nearly destroyed her family. Every week she received letters from mothers in prison asking for help with their own cases. One evening, as Sarah was putting Emma to bed, her daughter asked a question that stopped her heart. "Mama, why do people say you were a bad person before I was born?" Sarah sat down on Emma's bed and chose her words carefully. Emma was only 2 years old, but she was already smart and curious about everything around her. "Mama made some mistakes when she was younger," Sarah said honestly. "I did things that hurt other people and I had to go to jail to learn how to be better. But even when I was making mistakes, I loved you more than anything in the world." "Did the mistakes make you sad?" "Yes, baby, very sad. But you know what made me happy again?" Emma shook her head, her big brown eyes wide with curiosity. "You did. When you were born, you showed me what love really meant. You made me want to be the best person I could be." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She snuggled down into her blankets and asked for her favorite bedtime story, the one about the brave Apache warrior who helped a mama and baby escape from bad people. As Sarah told the familiar story, she realized that their journey wasn't really over. Emma would grow up and ask harder questions about why her mother had been in prison, why they had lived as fugitives, why their family was different from other families. But Sarah was ready for those conversations now. She had learned that the truth told with love and age-appropriate honesty was always better than lies or silence. Emma would grow up knowing that people could make mistakes and still be worthy of love. She would know that fighting for what's right sometimes requires great courage. Most importantly, she would know that a mother's love could overcome any obstacle. The baby selling scandal had led to major reforms in how children of incarcerated women were handled. Dozens of other mothers had been reunited with their children, and new oversight systems were put in place to prevent future corruption. Elena often said that the spirits had brought them all together for a reason. Sarah was beginning to believe her. Their story had become something bigger than just one mother and child. It had become hope for other families torn apart by an unfair system. 5 years later, on Emma's 7th birthday, they received a surprise visitor. Catherine Webb came to their door, sober and healthy after years of therapy. She asked if she could speak with Sarah privately. "I wanted to apologize," Catherine said, tears in her eyes. "And to thank you. Thank me for showing me what real love looks like. I've been getting help, and I've learned that what I felt for Emma wasn't age.